From our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans, welcome to our Louisiana Eats podcast series, Quick Bites. I'm Poppy Tooker. The Reverend Father Bill Dailey is a Catholic priest with an unusual resume. Along with his holy orders, Father Bill is a lawyer, law professor, instructor of philosophy, and a cocktailian mentor to bartenders across the country. We spoke with Father Bill about the spiritual service he provides during Tales of the Cocktail and his thoughts on how to imbibe with virtue.
I often say that if I am not the luckiest person in the world, I can't wait to meet who is, because they must have really great stories to tell. But mine has some logic to it. So I teach in the law school at Notre Dame, and to teach in a law school, my view is you should practice law. So I went to law school as a priest in order to get ready to do some work teaching or administrating at the University of Notre Dame. And after law school, I clerked for a federal judge. Then I practiced at a regular big corporate law firm in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, where I met a fellow named Derek Brown. And his girlfriend at the time had a bar called the Tabard Inn, where she made beautiful craft cocktails on Wednesday and Thursday nights. I was introduced to this place and to Chantal by a colleague of mine at the law firm. Derek came in one night and said, "Chantal tells me you're a priest. I would like to finish my Catholic initiation. Can you help me?" So on Sunday mornings, Derek would come to my parish. I would talk over then Father Ratzinger's book, Introduction to Christianity, written back in 1967, I think. We would chat about the Catholic faith, and he would say, "Hey, I'm opening this speakeasy tonight. You should come by." Or a group of us are planning a repeal day party in December. Would you be on the planning committee with us? Or we elected you chaplain to the D.C. Craft Cocktail Bartender Association. I said, "What are my duties?" "Well, as far as I could tell, you keep coming to our bars and we charge you less." It seemed like a good deal to me. So I joke with Derek that I tried to save his soul and he has tried to destroy my liver. May one of us succeed. Hopefully the right one.
That's something.
So then after I finished practicing in D.C., I moved up to New York City. I did a year as a scholar in residence at Columbia Law School, and where I met the good folks of Death and Company, a wonderful East Village bar.
Yes.
And Friday night for priests is Sunday night. So I would often have the Sunday evening Mass at 5:30 p.m. at my parish on the Upper West Side, Holy Trinity at 82nd and Broadway. And then I would walk 85 minutes down to Death and Company and wait outside with Frankie, who was then the doorman and since was the general manager, and I gather is moving on to something else now. But wait outside my 90 minutes and read a book until there was a seat available. And if you hang out at Death and Company enough on Sunday nights, you get to meet a whole lot of people in this industry.
So you get this induction into the craft cocktail world by just showing up,
That's
by
right.
just being there. And when did you first hear about Tales of the Cocktail and this opportunity?
When I moved to Notre Dame in South Bend, you might imagine that there are fewer craft cocktail bars in South Bend,
Yes.
and you would not be wrong. And so I didn't get to see my friends nearly as much. So once again, through the good offices of Derek Brown, he called me up. He said, "We need to find a way to get you to Tales of the Cocktail, because you'll get to see all of your friends from Seattle and Portland and Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York and D.C." So we conspired to put together a panel for 2012 Tales with Ron Cooper of Del Maguey, whom I hope you've had on your show or will. He's a spectacular person, brings in wonderful mezcals, and is himself a spiritual man. So Ron Cooper of Del Maguey, Tim Master of Chartreuse, which is a monastically produced spirit and really marvelous and captures the mystery of the monks very well. A representative of Benedictine, Marty Duffy from Chicago, Eric Seed from House Alpens. We all did a panel together called The Spirit of Spirits. And we talked about the intersection of religion and alcohol, which, as I'm sure you would imagine, goes back to as early as there was alcohol. There was religion and there was alcohol, and as the Psalm says in Psalm 104, he gives us wine to gladden our hearts. And so that has always brought people closer to God. And we did a panel about that. It was reasonably well received. And my friend Don Lee, whom I'd gotten to know through Jim Meehan at PDT, where Don was one of the founding bartenders, the following year said, I think it would be good for the CAP program if you would come and hang out with us. And that's not an offer you turn down. So
No.
Mostly my job is to be present to them. A priest and a bartender both share what we call in the caring professions, right? And so these hospitality professionals care for their guests and they care for one another in a way that is impressive and moving to me. And I suppose there's a kind of symbiosis in these friendships where they help me to be a better priest, and I hope, at least at the margins, I can help them to think about hospitality a little bit differently.
I am really, really so impressed by this because, honestly, here in Catholic New Orleans, Catholic South Louisiana, we know all about Catholicism. And I'll be honest with you, Father Bill, the CAPS program was the last place in the world I expected to find a priest, because when I usually hear about what the CAPS are up to, it's usually more about drunken debacles and sexcapades. I mean, I've heard a great deal of that. And so I was thinking, well, how does Father Bill fit into that scene? It goes all night. It's kind of wild. How many of them come into this knowing you're a priest? Are they surprised when they find out that you're a priest? Do you ever find their behaviors self-conscious in any way because suddenly they're hanging with a priest?
I hope they're not self-conscious, and just in my experience, they are not. I would say that while I have heard those same stories, for the most part, and certainly right up front, they're presented to me as a priest. I wear my Roman collar on the first day when they're presented with their jackets, their red coats as the new caps. There's a PowerPoint presentation. It says if you need help or advice in the kitchen, you go to Mike Ryan, who wears a white coat. If you need help with overall logistics, you go to Don Lee, who wears a white coat. If you need to know what's going on in the liquor room, you go to Chris DeLavi, who wears a white coat. And if you're having trouble with your roommate, if you're not sleeping well, if you overindulged, you can talk to Father Bill. And so
that's wonderful.
They present me as someone that they have brought in because they care about the human dimension of folks. And they want people to be responsible and to take care of themselves. We have a break room that has water and fresh fruit. And last year there were chair massages, I think, courtesy of Pernod Ricard. And so I think there has been a move with Tales growing and becoming so important to the industry to emphasize not just the wilder side of things, but also balance and the idea, as Robert Simonson from the New York Times, I brought him out to talk to my undergraduates at Notre Dame about virtue and alcohol. And he said to them that his mother, who just died last year, drank an old-fashioned every day, and Robert, in her honor, drinks one every Friday, and he wants to do that when he's 65 and 75 and 85, should he make it there. And so I think there's an emphasis now in the CAP program to make sure that these folks can sustain a career for the long haul. And that has to do with a little less debaucherousness, I suppose. If I heard confessions, I couldn't tell you, but I have neither been a part of nor witnessed any sexcapades. That's all I can tell you on that score.
Okay. Have you performed any marriages?
I have performed marriages in the industry. Indeed, I shouldn't say because people might guess who it is, but it's possible that I have been discussing upcoming marriages with folks even here at Tales. And so we're putting some dates together on that. So yes, I have been involved.
That's really charming. I have to say that learning this about Tales of the Cocktail, I've always appreciated and known what a huge educational element there is and how it really is about taste education and education. But to be finding this entire ethical slant to it is really inspiring and just, it's like opening a new door in my mind for how I view this event. And I certainly didn't mean to slant it dramatically any way in particular, except the caps do tend to be sort of like your fresh young bartenders, and you throw people into those situations. And we've had so much fun doing Tales pieces. Lord, last year we did a whole series about people finding love at Tales of the Cocktail. So
I joke sometimes with my fellow priests at Notre Dame who aren't quite sure what I'm coming down here for, that it's my flock of 20-something tattooed pagans, but they welcome me, and I'm not down here. I tell them at the beginning, if I can be supportive of them, if I can walk through this with them, that's great. I am not here to sell them Bibles or give them away, though I'm sure they're here in the rooms of the Monteleone. And I'm not here to convert people in any way other than what Pope Francis says, which is that if I live the joy of the gospel, then I'm doing the priesthood right. And so I'm not here to dissuade people from looking into why I live my life the way I do, but that's not the point of it. Is not evangelization. It's walking with people. So.
I appreciate that. That's just remarkable. I know that one of your particular bents is people's ethical behavior, that's something that has been the focus of some of your work outside of Tales of the Cocktail.
Right.
And so when it comes to bars, when it comes to drinking, could you tell me a little bit about how you regard the ethical responsibility of both the bartender and the cocktail drinker?
Sure. I'll tell you what I tell my students, right? So I deal with students from the age of 18 to 22 at Notre Dame, and as you might imagine, not all of them respect the law of the state of Indiana, which says that they need to be 21 when they drink. And as you might imagine, the 18 and 19-year-old and 20-year-old drinkers that I sometimes have to help to see some light, they don't have very good taste in booze either. So I tell them that their taste and their maturity need to grow swiftly, right? You need to think about who you want to be at midnight and plan to be that person. And if what you want to be at midnight is not someone you'd be proud to be, well, that's when you go out and buy a plastic bottle of something that doesn't taste very good and down as much of it as quickly as you can, hiding it with things that taste better to you than whatever's in that plastic bottle. That is the misuse and the abuse of alcohol to lead you away from who you want to be as your best self, right? Wine that gladdens the heart is, a cocktail shared with friends that certainly warms the spirit. I'm not saying there's no effect of alcohol on the system, right? And that's a part of what is good about it when it's used responsibly to build friendship, to build community. And we know when we're crossing a line or when we're fooling ourselves, perhaps, and we're actually just trying to lower our inhibitions or put ourselves in places that we wouldn't be proud to be in the light of day. So I try to get people to think about that. And I think bartenders know if you go to PDT, they've got a set of rules. They won't serve people who have been overserved. Down here in the boardroom, there are discussions of how much should we be pouring at a tasting where there are maybe 10 glasses. We have to make sure that we remind people that there is a spit bucket and it should be used, that it would be irresponsible for people to drink 12 ounces of 80 proof liquor in one sitting at 10:30 in the morning, which you could do down here. But so I think everyone who's involved with Tales, certainly the professionals operating at the highest level down here, do take into account their ethical obligations. And I've heard it uttered in many seminars by a variety of presenters, and certainly in the CAP program, Don Lee and Leo Robachek and Mike Ryan and John Darragon think about that and try to put together seminars that are responsible and that teach responsibility.
Father Bill, give us an overview of how you see spirits and spirituality going hand in hand.
Well, there were 2 points we tried to make in a panel that we did on that I mentioned earlier. Derek Brown and Eric Seed and some of the other presenters talked about the history from the earliest times, people who believed in God, one God or another, and who discovered that fruit rotting over in the corner actually was fermenting, and that there was something profound, something that warmed the heart about that alcohol. It began to be incorporated into religious rituals. It's not accidental that wine is the first miracle in the Gospel of John. There was something that warmed the heart at that wedding at Cana, and that was a foreshadowing of what for Catholics and other Christians is the Eucharist, right? Communion, bread and wine. My contribution to that panel was to think more broadly about hospitality. And what I tried to make was the following point, which is think about why people come into a church. They've moved to a new town and they want community. They come to a church because someone has died and they want consolation. They come to a church because they've gotten engaged and they want to celebrate and solemnize what they've just done and plan for a wedding. They come to a church because they're feeling lost. Why do people show up at a bar in some city they may not have lived in? They want to find community and communion. They may have had a bad day and they need some consolation. They may have gotten a scary medical result. They may have just gotten engaged and they want to go celebrate and buy everyone a round of bubbles. Precisely the same things that bring people into a church and into my line of work bring people into a bar, seeking hospitality. And what a bartender does, what a priest does when we are doing our jobs well, is to create a space for people who are hurting, who are lonely, who are celebrating, and that's a ministry of hospitality. And so I think, as I said earlier, it's fair to say that there is a commonality of professions between these bartenders and myself, and they are caring professions at their very best, and they help people to feel a little bit more comfortable in the world.
That's wonderful. Father Bill, it was a blessing to have you join us on Louisiana Eats, and I'm honored to have met you. And when you come back to Tales, I hope you'll check in with us and come back and see us again.
Anytime. It was a pleasure to be here and a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Father Bill Dailey, Catholic priest, professor at Notre Dame, and devoted cocktailian. Despite his wide exposure to the most cutting edge of cocktails, Father Bill's favorite drink is a gin martini, stirred, not shaken, no matter what James Bond says. To make Father Bill's classic, just combine 2.5 ounces of gin with 1/2 ounce of dry vermouth in a shaker filled with ice. Stir for 30 seconds, then strain into a chilled, stemmed cocktail glass. Add olives or a lemon twist, and then it's bottoms up. Bless you, Father Bill. Don't miss a delicious upcoming serving of Louisiana Eats by subscribing to our podcast. Also, visit poppytooker.com for lots more recipes, delicious food ideas, and exclusive behind-the-scenes videos. Louisiana Eats original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Thanks to Sarah Holtz, who produced this podcast. I'm Poppy Tooker. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our major sponsors, Camellia Beans, Zatarans, and Rouse's Markets. Visit poppytooker.com to see a full list of our partners. This Louisiana Eats Quick Bite was produced by Poppy Tooker Broadcasting.